Welcome back to The Deep Dive. This is the show where we take your source material, the books and research that matter to you, and we break it all down. We do the heavy lifting so you can walk away with the core insights.
And today, our deep dive is, it's one that really pushes the boundaries of consensus reality.
I'd say so.
The source material is the book Closer Encounters by Reza Jorjani. And this book, it really sits at a wild intersection of philosophy, geopolitical history, and, ufology.
Right.
So our mission today is very specific. We're going to isolate the philosophical groundwork he lays out in the introduction, and then we're going to dive straight into the political and historical bombshells in Chapter 1, UAP Disclosure and Sovereignty.
Okay, so this isn't just about lights in the sky.
Right.
Jorjani is basically suggesting that this whole phenomenon, it redefines everything. Human civilization, global power, even our understanding of time itself.
Exactly. It's a fundamental reconstruction of reality.
All right, let's get into it. And I think the best place to start is with the author himself. His background gives a lot of context for the rigor he's trying to apply here.
It really does.
I mean, before we even get to the really radical stuff, you have to understand where he's coming from. He's known for this work that pulls together very academic philosophy with subjects that are usually pushed to the speculative fringe.
Yeah, the source mentions his essay Black Sunrise and the novel Faustian Futurist. So he's been thinking about these kinds of suppressed histories for a long time.
But it's not just speculative fiction.
No, not at all. And this is what gives the work let's say, its authority. He applies serious academic rigor to topics that are just completely dismissed by the mainstream.
Right.
The source points to his other work, Prometheus and Atlas. And the crucial detail there is that it won the book award of the Parapsychological Association.
Okay, and that's significant because
the Parapsychological Association is a member of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science.
Wow. So he's not some outsider yelling into the void. He's trying to bridge the gap between hard science and these phenomena that hard science just refuses to look at.
Precisely. And that framing is so important because it gets to his core argument that ufology presents the most fascinating and revolutionary philosophical questions of all time.
And he thinks we're being suppressed.
Brutally suppressed is the term he uses. He doesn't see it as just, academic shyness. He sees it as an intellectual defense mechanism against ideas that would just shatter the established materialist worldview.
So for him, things like ufology and parapsychology are two sides of the same coin.
They're completely intertwined. Both challenge the very boundaries of what we think is real or even possible.
And because that reality is so complex, he starts by laying out 6 different hypotheses for what these close encounters could actually be. And he stresses that they aren't mutually exclusive.
Right, he sees them as interwoven. Different explanations could all be partially true depending on the specific encounter you're looking at. It's not a simple one-size-fits-all explanation.
It's a spectrum that goes way beyond the simple little green men from another planet idea.
Far beyond it. Let's walk through them. A couple are pretty familiar, I think, to anyone who's looked into this.
Okay, so you've got hypothesis 2, which is the interdimensional hypothesis. UFOs are from other parallel realities, other dimensions, and they can kind of phase shift in and out of our world.
A classic. And then there's hypothesis 4, the standard extraterrestrial hypothesis. Aliens from other star systems.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
But the other 4 are where things get really revolutionary. They start to challenge our whole concept of time and human history.
Absolutely. Let's start with hypothesis 1, the breakaway civilization.
This one is fascinating.
It posits that UFOs are made right here on Earth by a hidden society that has technologically diverged from the rest of us. So the phenomenon isn't alien at all. It's a highly advanced human group operating in total secrecy.
Living right here among us, potentially.
Potentially, and that ties directly into hypothesis 3, which is the time machine hypothesis.
Right, that the occupants are time travelers, maybe even humans from our own future.
Exactly. So the phenomenon becomes this kind of historical civil war, with the future actively interfering in our present and our past.
Okay, that's already a huge leap, but then we get into the really esoteric stuff.
We do. Hypothesis 5 is the ultra-terrestrial or psychic theory, and this is where he brings in ideas from, like Carl Jung.
Psychic projections.
Basically, yeah. That UFOs aren't physical craft in the way we think of them. They're more like psychic projections from the collective unconscious. Or he uses the term egregores, collective thought forms that somehow manifest physically.
So the experience is generated from inside the human mind. but it becomes real. It blurs the line between a dream and reality.
It completely blurs that line. It turns the study of UFOs into a study of human consciousness itself. And then you have the final one, Hypothesis 6, which is the ultimate reality bender.
The simulation hypothesis.
Right. We're all inside a giant computer program, and the aliens are either other players, avatars, or maybe even the programmers themselves, using cheat codes to break the laws of physics.
So depending on which of these you lean towards, breakaway humans, future time travelers, psychic projections, or programmers, the philosophical stakes change completely.
They do. But the key mechanism, the thing that really ties together the breakaway and the time travel ideas, is the concept of the technological singularity.
Let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't see technology as this slow, steady progress.
Not at all. He frames it as a curve that suddenly bends almost vertically into an exponential spike. That spike is the singularity.
And what happens when we hit that spike?
Two things, according to the source. First, life as we know it is no longer recognizably human. It becomes transhuman something, incomprehensible, an overman.
And the second thing?
The invention of time travel becomes possible.
So that's the real prize. Inventing time travel is the defining feature of the singularity.
Because once you have it, you instantly have access to every other technological development that will ever exist. It collapses the future into the present.
Okay, but what powers this? What's the engine for that kind of leap?
This is the scientific core of the whole argument. It's zero-point energy, ZPE.
Can you just slow down and explain what that is?
Sure. ZPE is it's the residual energy that exists in empty space. Even at absolute zero, when all heat is gone, there's still this background quantum fluctuation. It's energy from nothing.
And he's saying someone figured out how to harness it.
Exactly. The technology that can tap into ZPE, what he calls electrogravitic technology, is what allows you to manipulate space-time itself.
So mastering ZPE isn't just a new power source, it's the key that unlocks the universe.
It's the epitome of the technological singularity, as he puts it. It lets you transcend our normal four-dimensional existence, length, width, height, and time, and start operating in a five-dimensional hyperspace.
What does that even look like? Operating in 5D hyperspace.
It means you're no longer bound by linear time, where cause has to come before effect. Think of our timeline, our 4D existence, as a river flowing in one direction.
Okay.
Someone operating in 5D isn't in the river. They're standing on the bank, looking down at the entire river at once. They can see the source, the end, and every point in between, all at the same time. They can bend it or even jump from one point to another.
So this breakaway civilization, or this future overmen, they've mastered ZPE, and they can basically treat our history like a toy.
They've bent our 4D timeline into a vortex, like the event horizon of a black hole. History itself is now inside that vortex, and they can manipulate it.
Which makes the breakaway civilization not just a secret society on Earth, they're a society that exists outside of our linear time.
Exactly. They are both terrestrial and hyperdimensional. And this is where the source moves from abstract physics to some really concrete and very controversial historical claims.
He argues this ZPE technology isn't a new discovery.
No, he says Nikola Tesla was working on this etheric power technology, and that Tesla was actually rediscovering something a secret Prussian airship company had been using in America way back in the 1860s to 90s.
But this is where the big conspiracy starts, right? With Tesla and the bankers.
With Tesla and J.P. Morgan. The story goes that Morgan briefly funded Tesla, but then pulled the funding and, according to this narrative, stole his designs.
Designs for what?
For UFOs, for electrogravitic craft. And Morgan allegedly passed these designs to a parallel project run by a Northern European Billy, an occult group he calls the NORDICs.
Okay, so this Nordic group was after the same tech, but for a different reason. They called it Vril.
Right. Vril is this idea from an old novel about a powerful life force energy. For this occult elite, Jorjani describes, harnessing Vril was the same as achieving the technological singularity. It was the key to producing the coming race, the transhuman overmen.
And he claims they set up European fascism, especially Nazism, as a kind of political cover story.
As a front, a political project to protect their secret technology from the global threat of communism.
This is a huge claim, that one of the darkest ideologies in history was just a smokescreen for a secret tech project, and that it was financed by American capitalists.
That's the argument. The central motive, as the source lays it out, was oil.
Oil.
Think about it. Figures like Morgan, Allen Dulles, John Rockefeller, their fortunes were built on the oil industry. If ZPE, this free etheric energy, became public knowledge, the entire fossil fuel economy would collapse overnight.
So they propped up a political ideology that would ensure the ZPE tech stayed secret and controlled by their elite group.
That's the claim. It's staggering. It suggests that period of history was really an economic war over proprietary technology, and it all culminates in something called Project Kronos,
Which was?
the secret project that really accelerated under the Nazis. In Prague, in 1944, he says SS physicists used a massive bell-shaped ZPE device, you might have heard of Die Glock, the bell, to actually rupture the space-time continuum.
And when it was clear they were going to lose the war.
The elite in charge, who now had working time-space technology just left, they chose to break away from our world and explore the hyperdimensional capabilities of their craft.
And that's the birth of the breakaway civilization. Hypothesis 1. They're not aliens from another star. There are human relatives.
Descendants of this intercontinental Nordic elite, there are technologically advanced human ancestors, and they're operating from the event horizon of the singularity.
So, if this breakaway group is the statuesque master race he talks about, where do the Greys and the reptilians that people always report, where do they fit in?
They're subordinates, or maybe even just tools. Jorjani's claim is that the Greys and reptilians are genetic chimeras, biological robots designed and deployed by this Nordic master race.
That's a huge claim. Does he have any support for that? I mean, any accounts where people see the Nordics actually commanding the Greys?
The support isn't so much from, direct eyewitness accounts of that hierarchy in action. It's more of a philosophical implication based on their technological status. If they're the ones who developed the ZPE technology, they control the whole show. They control the materials, the genetics. So it suggests a very systematic, organized operation where the Greys are just biological drones. Remote-controlled proxies used for dirty work, like abductions or data collection.
While the real sovereign actors, the human breakaway group, stay hidden.
Exactly, and their headquarters aren't in some distant galaxy.
No, the book explicitly says most UFOs travel from extensive submarine bases here on Earth to the Moon and Mars.
And it goes even further. It posits that the Moon itself is artificial. A hollow satellite built by these ancestors as a kind of lifeboat after a nuclear war destroyed their original civilization on Mars.
My God, okay, that is a hell of a philosophical setup. It blends secret history, radical physics, everything. So that's the lens he provides in the introduction. Let's move to Chapter 1, which brings all of this into the very modern political arena.
Right, into the world of UAP disclosure and sovereignty.
Yeah, Chapter 1 jumps right into our current moment. It focuses on that huge shift in the official story, the Pentagon report on UAPs from June 2021.
A seismic shift.
For decades, the official line was just denial, ridicule. Now, all of a sudden, the government is acknowledging these things are real, they're intelligently controlled, they have advanced tech, and they might be a threat to national security.
And the author argues that just that shift alone is profoundly significant. Even if you don't believe a word of the official narrative, the simple fact that the U.S. government went from it's swamp gas to it's a potential threat, that forces everyone to take it seriously.
But Jorjani immediately throws a wrench in it. He critiques a key claim in that report, the part where they say USAF data collection has been limited historically.
He calls it a blatant lie.
And he's arguing that the whole rebranding from UFO to UAP is basically a trick, a way to bury decades of data.
That's exactly it. When you look at the historical record, it's hard to argue with him. Under projects like Blue Book, the USAF collected a massive archive of data on these encounters, going all the way back to the 1950s. So he sees this rebranding to UAP as an administrative sleight of hand. You create a new acronym so you can file away 70 years of really inconvenient data and pretend you're starting from scratch.
And the data they're trying to suppress, according to the source, is specifically the history of these objects interacting with our most sensitive military assets.
Nuclear facilities.
Yeah. This is where you see the real gravity of the situation.
This historical pattern is unambiguous. It shows technological superiority and a very focused strategic interest. These aren't just random flybys. They are targeted assertions of dominance over humanity's ultimate weapon.
Let's get specific, because the details are just chilling. Let's start with Vandenberg Air Force Base, 1964.
A classic case. Lieutenant Robert Jacobs is filming a missile test at night, and his camera captures a flying saucer.
It just watches.
No. It intercepts a dummy warhead after it separates from the booster rocket. It circles it, and then it fires visible beams of light at the warhead.
Laser beams.
Or something like them. And immediately, the warhead just tumbles and falls out of the sky. The UAP proved it could neutralize our ballistic missile capabilities.
And what was the official reaction?
Total suppression. The film was immediately confiscated by CIA agents, classified top secret. Jacobs was told to shut up and say he never saw anything. But that one event, decades ago, was irrefutable proof for the top brass that some outside force could control our nuclear arsenal.
And then the threat gets even more intense at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967. This wasn't a dummy warhead, this was live ICBMs.
20 of them. 2 separate incidents, just days apart. A huge 90-foot diameter red glowing oval just hovered over these strategic air command facilities.
End result.
Staggering. A total of 20 nuclear-tipped ICBMs were disabled, all at once. They were put into a no-go status. They were completely offline, unusable.
20 missiles, all with their own independent power, their own fail-safes, and they all go down together. How did the engineers even explain that?
They couldn't. It took about 10 seconds per missile to shut them down. They brought in experts from Boeing, and they had no conventional explanation. Their final conclusion was terrifying.
Which way?
That an electromagnetic pulse had to have been directly injected deep underground into each silo.
Injected, so it wasn't just like an EMP blast in the atmosphere. This was a surgical strike.
Surgical sabotage of our most deeply buried, most secure assets. Just think about that for a second. 20 nuclear missiles neutralized. That is not a malfunction. It's a calculated, decisive demonstration of total technological control.
And the source is clear. This wasn't just happening to the U.S. The Soviets were dealing with the exact same thing.
Absolutely, which implies these UAPs had no allegiance in the Cold War. They treated both superpowers like children playing with matches.
So what happened with the Soviets?
Well, for example, in October 1964, their Voskhod the first and Voskhod the second spacecraft were forced to return to Earth early. The cosmonauts reported being violently struck by extremely fast-flying disks that had powerful magnetic fields.
And then there's the Kapustin Yar incident in 1989.
Yeah, detailed in a declassified KGB file. Dozens of Soviet military personnel watched a disc-shaped object hover over the base's nuclear weapons depot. They saw direct laser beams into the roof of the building where the nukes were stored.
The pattern is identical. Across decades, across superpowers, they can monitor, manipulate, or neutralize our nuclear weapons whenever they want.
It got so bad by the late 60s that the National Military Command was deeply concerned. The Air Force's entire nuclear arsenal was briefly put on high alert, ready for potential deployment because of these incursions over SAC bases. This is the ultimate existential crisis for any nation-state.
Which brings us to the next part of the argument. We've moved from the history of these incursions to the hard physical proof of this advanced technology.
Right. This is where the science comes in, the analysis of the materials these things leave behind. And for that, we have to look at the work of scientists like Jacques Vallée.
What did he find?
He analyzed residual material slag, metal fragments left at encounter sites, and on the surface, the elemental composition was normal, terrestrial. But when they looked closer, they found a massive anomaly.
Which was?
The isotopic ratios of the magnesium had been artificially altered.
Okay, that's a huge deal. Altering isotopic ratios means you're messing with the core of the atom itself. That's not metallurgy, that's advanced nuclear science.
Exactly. It implies a technology that can literally re-engineer the building blocks of matter, maybe to create super strong or super light materials. And Vallée's research showed that this kind of isotope manipulation wasn't supposed to be possible for us, for anyone, until decades after these samples were collected in the 50s and 60s.
Which points right back to that breakaway civilization idea.
It does, either an ancient civilization or one operating from the future. And the physical evidence gets even more disturbing when you look at the phenomenon of implants.
The work of Dr. Roger Leir.
Dr. Leir performed 17 surgeries to remove foreign objects from alleged abductees. And these weren't delusions. These were real physical objects. Some T-shaped, some like little cantaloupe seeds that he surgically removed.
And what happened when they were tested?
The analysis, which was secretly funded by Robert Bigelow and done at labs, including Los Alamos, confirmed what Vallée found. The objects had artificially modified isotopic ratios and clear evidence of nanoscale engineering.
So again, the materials are from Earth, but the way they're put together is completely alien to our technology.
And the conclusion the author draws from this, it's maybe the starkest line in the whole book. He says, whoever they are, they forcibly tag us like we tag animals in the wild or brand cattle on a ranch.
Wow. The implication is we're not even sovereign over our own bodies.
And that leads directly to the central political question of the chapter.
If there's an entity that can violate your airspace at will, shut down your nuclear arsenal, and tag your citizens like livestock. What happens to the whole idea of state sovereignty?
To really get a handle on that, the source turns to the political philosopher Carl Schmitt. He's a controversial figure, but his ideas about power are critical here.
Okay, so what's Schmitt's core idea?
Schmitt argues that all sovereign authority, all political power, is grounded on one basic distinction: the distinction between friend and enemy.
Right.
The sovereign is the one who gets to decide who the enemy is and then acts to protect their people from that enemy.
That makes sense when the enemy is another country, another state. But how does a UAP, something that isn't a state and is way more powerful, break that system?
It just shatters it in three critical ways. First, Schmitt says the legitimacy of a state needs an outside, unexplored lands, a foreign country, something that defines the borders of your political world. A world government that includes everyone can't be a true homeland, a Heimat, because there's nothing outside of it to define yourself against.
And a non-terrestrial entity just blows that whole concept up.
Completely. The political boundary vanishes. The nation-state becomes obsolete. And the second point is about crisis.
How so?
Schmitt argues that you see who the true sovereign is during a state of emergency. A war, a plague, a catastrophe. The body that can actually maintain order when the law breaks down, that's the real sovereign.
So if UAPs represent a planetary emergency, and our governments can't do anything about it, it reveals that the actual sovereign authority is somewhere else.
Maybe it's the breakaway civilization itself, or maybe sovereignty has to be immediately and radically rebuilt on a global scale.
Which leaves us with this existential political problem. If all of humanity is faced with an entity we define as the ultimate enemy, national sovereignty just collapses.
And the options, according to this analysis, are pretty grim. It's either you surrender to a technologically superior power that sees you as genetic property,
Wow.
or you unify all nations under a single world government. You give an institution like the UN real, actual sovereign power.
But hold on. If you create a global government and its entire justification is dehumanizing the UAP as the enemy, aren't you just trading national sovereignty for a global tyranny? Does the source see any way out of that?
It's deeply pessimistic about it, because the nature of the breakaway civilization, as Jorjani frames it, is fundamentally exploitative. So a world government created to fight them would likely just mirror their authoritarianism. You'd get a planetary government to manage the threat, but you'd sacrifice individual freedom and that sense of Heimat, of belonging.
And then the discussion takes this very high-level political theory and smashes it into a terrifyingly specific real-world incident. The Linda Corteil abduction case in Manhattan, 1989.
This case is so critical because of who the witnesses were. Linda Corteil was apparently levitated out of her apartment window by a UFO right near the Brooklyn Bridge.
And someone important saw it happen.
The confirmation came from two security personnel, bodyguards, and they were chauffeuring the UN Secretary General, Javier Pérez de Cuellar, that night.
You're kidding me. The Secretary General of the United Nations, the guy who presided over the end of the Cold War, the potential head of a new world government. He was a direct witness to a high-strangeness abduction.
He was there. It suggests this phenomenon operates right at the highest levels of global political power.
And there's physical evidence that corroborates part of her story, right?
There is. During hypnotic regression, Linda recalled a very specific, strange detail. She said she looked out of a porthole on the UFO and saw the bottom of the East River, all lit up and covered in litter right below them.
Which means the UFO, in the middle of New York City, was operating underwater.
Precisely. Which ties right back to the idea of vast submarine bases. It's all happening right under the nose of global governance. It proves that Schmitt's political conundrum is real. The threat is planetary, and it directly involves the very people, like the UN Secretary General, who would be tasked with creating a new global sovereign authority to deal with it.
Okay. We have covered an incredible amount of ground here.
We really have. Just looking at the introduction in Chapter 1 of Closer Encounters, we started with that philosophical blueprint, the technological singularity, zero-point energy, and this idea of a breakaway civilization operating in 5D hyperspace, able to manipulate time itself.
And then we anchored that theory with the hard data from Chapter 1, the documented incursions at Vandenberg and Malmstrom, proving they can disable our nuclear weapons, the physical evidence-altered isotopes, nano-engineered implants, And finally, using Carl Schmitt's political theory, the implication that state sovereignty is basically an illusion in the face of an entity that can treat us like property.
Right, and it's an entity operating at the highest levels of power, proven by that shocking UN Secretary General incident. And all these concepts, the breakaway civilization, Nordic time travelers, the artificial moon, this is just the foundation.
This is just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. The next chapters of the book go so much deeper into the historical origins of this Nordic group, their links to fascism, the real history of Mars, how the moon was built, and the sinister role of a trickster intelligence in all of this.
And we will have to save that analysis for our next deep dive into the source material. But for now, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
If the nature of reality, of history, and even the idea of human freedom can be influenced or completely rewritten by technologically advanced actors who are operating outside of our laws, what does that mean for your sense of personal agency?
Yeah. What does it mean for the choices you think you're making in a world that might already be ruled by a power you can't even see? Continuing with the analysis, we will now discuss what happens when we move beyond lights in the sky and look directly at the occupants and the interaction. We are delving into the most profound and, frankly, the most disturbing philosophical study of the close encounter phenomenon, specifically the third and fourth kinds, where contact becomes physical or near physical.
That's exactly right. This section of the source material presents a hypothesis that, well, it drastically redefines the entire field. It moves so far beyond the standard extraterrestrial model.
Right.
We're no longer talking about distant visitors from another star. We are synthesizing data that points towards something internal, something deeply manipulative.
So what's our mission today with this part of the deep dive?
Our goal today is to really grapple with the identity of these entities, the almost godlike nature of their technology, and this profoundly unsettling idea that these encounters are rooted in a systematic, long-term project of, well, of genetic ownership and psychological control.
Okay, so the mission is clear. We need to synthesize the data on observable paranormal effects, examine the identities of the beings, and here we're talking specifically about the tall white Nordics and the grays.
Yes, those two groups in particular.
We also have to dissect the political deception that seems to be inherent in the contactee movement, and then scrutinize the physical, the really visceral evidence of manipulation. I'm talking about implants and animal mutilations.
Exactly.
We're focused on extracting the core knowledge from this chapter, which describes the entities behind the most extreme forms of contact.
And we really have to begin by just acknowledging the sheer impossibility of the phenomena reported during these close encounters of the fourth kind. You know, CE4s. These accounts suggest a mastery over physics that, if it's true, it means these entities operate completely outside the bounds of reality as we understand it.
So when we talk about CE4's abductions, we're forced to confront reports that just entirely defy our known laws of physics. The source material seems to emphasize that the core technological capability of these entities isn't, their propulsion system. It's their ability to manipulate the space-time continuum at will. It grants them what amounts to, I guess, hyperdimensional control over our four-dimensional reality.
Think about what that actually means, overcoming physical laws. The sources cite very specific cases that demand we just, throw out the textbook.
But what? What are some examples?
Well, the famous Betty Andreasson case, for instance. It includes reports where her abductors walked straight through solid walls, just phased right through them.
Okay, that's already a huge leap.
It is. Or consider the infamous Linda Cortiel abduction in New York City. The abductee was levitated, but the key detail, the one that changes everything, is that she was pulled through a solid metal window guard.
Through metal, not around it.
Through it. This is not just some advanced lifting technology like a tractor beam. This is the ability for two solid objects to pass through one another.
That immediately raises a massive physical question for me. If they're manipulating matter at that level, what on earth does it feel like for the person being manipulated?
It's described as traumatic in the extreme. It's horrifying. Abductees who later recall this passage through solid barriers, usually under deep clinical hypnosis, they describe a horrific physical sensation.
I can't even imagine.
It's an intense energy feeling. They say it pulls their bodies apart at a molecular level, almost like being dissolved, before their matter is rapidly, knated back together again on the other side.
My God.
This suggests a phase shift capability, a manipulation of matter at the most fundamental quantum level.
I can't imagine the psychological terror of feeling your own body dissolving and then reassembling itself. The sources note that the blood-curdling screams that sometimes accompany the recall of this moment. It speaks volumes about the absolute intensity of that sensation.
It is pure, uncontrolled physiological terror.
It has to be.
And it forces us, as you said, to redefine technology. This isn't just about faster computers or, better alloys for a ship. If they're operating from a fifth-dimensional reference frame, a hyperspace, then the objects themselves, the UFOs, are functioning as time machines.
Dipping in and out.
Exactly, dipping in and out of our time continuum. That's why they can suddenly appear or disappear instantaneously. They aren't moving fast in our 3 dimensions, they are shifting dimensionally.
And that capability allows 2 solid objects to occupy the same space temporarily.
Yes, because in that moment, the law-like behavior of our known physical world is entirely transcended. It just doesn't apply.
This is where the analysis moves from, abstract theory to something with corroborated reality. The case study that took place in the most densely populated, probably most skeptical city in the world.
The Linda Korkel abduction, New York City, 1989.
This isn't just a fascinating encounter, it's one with extremely high-level witnesses.
Yes, and this is where the source material truly excels in connecting these disparate dots. Linda Korkel was levitated out of her apartment window in Manhattan, but the crucial point is who saw it.
Right.
The UN Secretary General at the time, Javier Pérez de Cuellar, was allegedly stuck in traffic right nearby. He was in a car with 2 of his specialized security personnel, his bodyguards.
And these aren't just, rent-a-cops.
Not at all. These were top-tier, world-class protection experts, and they witnessed the entire event.
That is just an extraordinary claim. The sitting head of the United Nations, an organization often linked to nascent world governance, was an unwilling witness to a close encounter of the 4th kind, involving technology that breaks physics.
It's stunning.
Why? Why risk exposing themselves to someone that politically significant?
The source material strongly suggests it was an intentional statement, an act of intimidation.
A mess.
A very loud one. And the psychological impact on the witnesses, it supports this interpretation. Those 2 security men were so profoundly affected by what they saw, a woman levitating through a solid window guard toward a silent craft, that they were sleeping with weapons.
Not just their guns, right?
No, not just pistols. The source mentions baseball bats. For weeks afterward, they reportedly even put dummies in their beds.
Wow.
These were highly trained, unflappable professionals, and the experience completely broke their sense of reality.
And you have to consider the timing. The event occurred during a very sensitive political period. Pérez de Cuellar was overseeing the end of the Cold War. Discussions were underway about strengthening the UN.
Exactly. So if this breakaway civilization is running a deep game, trying to influence global power structures, this sighting sends an incredibly loud, unmistakable message.
What's the message?
The message is, we are real and we possess power you cannot possibly comprehend.
So the implication is that this was designed to confirm their reality in the highest political echelons possible. A profound intimidation factor. And Linda's subsequent recollection under hypnosis, that provided stunning confirmation of the location, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Linda's memory, recovered under clinical hypnosis, corroborated a key detail that was known only to those 2 security men.
And what was that?
She recalled looking out the porthole of the craft and clearly seeing the heavily littered, dark bottom of the East River, which was unnaturally illuminated.
So the craft went underwater.
It confirmed the craft had taken her underwater near the Brooklyn Bridge before rising up again. This is a very specific geographic detail that locks their testimonies together.
And the corroboration doesn't even end there. We have another witness, Janet Kimball, who was crossing the Brooklyn Bridge at the same time.
Right. Kimball provides another critical piece of the puzzle. She reported that her car died suddenly on the bridge alongside other vehicles.
Including, presumably, the Secretary General's car.
Presumably. She saw these intense bright lights, found the hovering aircraft absolutely terrifying, and watched it rise over the building before it sped away.
But there's a physical detail in her account that's crucial, right?
Very crucial one. The strong electromagnetic or static electricity fields associated with the craft's propulsion. She described her clothing clinging to her body and her hair standing on end as the UFO passed over.
That signature, the car dying, the intense light, the localized static charge, that's a hallmark. It's consistent across so many of these highly stressful encounters. It indicates a specific, non-conventional propulsion system, likely tied to their hyperdimensional capability.
Exactly. And the profound trauma is another consistent signature. We have to mention the 1993 New Jersey case as well.
Right.
5 people, including a trained physician, experienced extreme confusion, missing time, and temporary paralysis while these small gray beings were present in their home. The source material notes the physician involved was completely distraught for weeks, suffering from crippling PTSD.
So these are not benevolent visits.
Far from it. They are deeply frightening incursions that often leave witnesses mentally and emotionally disabled.
The consistent psychological wreckage left behind by these hyperdimensional incursions, it forces us to transition from what they can do to, well, to who is doing it. What kind of entity capable of such technological mastery would engage in such profoundly calculated and inhuman acts of terror?
And this brings us to the shocking identity of the entities that are allegedly piloting these hyperdimensional craft. Because while the Greys are often the primary laborers, the sources repeatedly point to another group as the ones in operational command.
The tall white Nordics.
The tall white Nordics.
Before we get into the massive implications of their identity, let's just establish the physical description that is so consistently reported in the sources.
The source material provides a remarkably specific and consistent profile of these so-called Nordics. They're typically tall, ranging dramatically from 5'6" up to, in some reports, a towering 9 feet.
9 feet tall.
That's what some reports claim. They possess a distinct Northern European, a Nordic phenotype. Sharp, chiseled features, exceptionally broad and tall foreheads. They're usually described as athletic but lean, with long arms.
And their hands.
Abductees frequently note their hands. They often compare them to the hands of pianists, long, thin, and delicate, yet immensely strong.
And their movement is also specific.
Yes. Crucially, their movement is often described. They walk with a majestic, elegant, and rhythmical gait.
That physical profile, tall, blonde, chiseled, majestic, it sounds less like an alien species that evolved on another planet and much more like an idealized, almost mythic human template.
And that observation is the crucial pivot point of the entire thesis presented in this source material.
Which is?
Contrary to the standard extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ETH, the sources assert that those piloting most of these advanced UFOs are not aliens from distant star systems.
They're human.
They are our human ancestors, a highly evolved faction of humanity. Nordic time travelers who originate from the event horizon of the technological singularity.
Okay, let's unpack the concept of the technological singularity for our listeners because it's absolutely vital to this argument.
A technological singularity is a predicted point in human development where technological progress accelerates exponentially, reaching a point past which we can't accurately predict the future anymore.
The curve goes vertical.
It goes vertical. The sources posit that one of the defining technologies achieved at this event horizon is the mastery of zero-point energy, or ZPE, and electrogravitics. This is what enables time travel by allowing them to manipulate space-time and transcend four-dimensional existence, operating from hyperspace.
So this isn't just a future society. It's a faction of future human beings who have achieved both chronological and technological superiority. And the core claim is that this master race, this highly evolved Nordic lineage, genetically engineered the majority of terrestrial humanity as a slave race millennia ago.
That is the claim presented by the sources. Yes, they were the gods, the titans, the elders, seen and worshipped by ancient civilizations. Their initial interaction with early human groups was one of instruction and manipulation, aimed at cultivating a specific genetic baseline for future use or, well, for subservience.
If they are the master race, then what role do the more frequently seen Greys and reptilians play in all this? Are they independent entities?
According to this thesis, absolutely not. The Greys and the alleged reptilians are defined not as independent alien species, but as, and this is a quote from the source, genetic chimera and biological robots.
Biological robots.
Designed, manufactured, and operated by this statuesque Nordic elite. They are tools, biological or synthetic constructs, tasked with carrying out the often unpleasant tasks of physical interaction, collection, and manipulation.
This shift in identity just changes the entire narrative of abduction. It goes from a scenario of interstellar visitation to one of advanced, historical, self-directed human eugenics and resource management. Do the sources provide specific abduction literature to back up this idea that the Nordics are in charge of the Greys?
They do, and most notably again in the Betty Andreasen case. She recalled being taken aboard a craft and meeting angelic-looking tall Nordics. They were referred to as elders, with bright platinum blonde hair.
And they were in charge.
They appear to be in complete operational control of the Greys. Furthermore, and this is the really chilling detail, the elders allegedly confirmed to Andreessen that the Greys were not truly aliens from another planet.
And what are they?
They are genetically modified human fetuses, a truly cold, clinical, and manufactured servant race.
The idea that the Greys are essentially laboratory-engineered human derivatives fetuses grown into short, highly functional but emotionally sterile biological robots is incredibly dark.
It's horrifying.
It implies a long-term self-directed program by a future faction of humanity aiming at a very narrow, cold ideal of perfection, viewing the rest of us as merely raw genetic material or just disposable, controllable assets. The connection to a self-proclaimed master race ideology, unfortunately, seems hardwired into their physical characteristics and their operational hierarchy.
If these Nordic entities view us as engineered property, they can't simply reveal their hand without causing global panic and rebellion. So the sources argue they require a sophisticated public relations strategy.
Which manifested when?
In the 1950s and 60s as the contactee phenomenon.
This was the public-facing narrative, right? The Space Brothers. We had leaders like Billy Meyer, George Van Tassel, George Adamski, George Hunt Williamson. They all claimed the Nordics were a benevolent elder race, offering spiritual and technological guidance.
Yes, it was a meticulously crafted deception designed to shape the collective consciousness. The message was always one of peace, brotherhood, and, correcting humanity's religious misunderstandings.
Meyer even claimed he met Jesus.
He did. He famously claimed they introduced him to Jesus, asserting that Christ was one of their people who had been misunderstood by terrestrial history. This is, in effect, an attempt to hijack or rewrite human religious narratives to align them with the long-term Nordic agenda of control and guidance.
The sources, however, pull back this benign veneer to reveal something much darker, disturbing connections to fascist ideology beneath the surface of the contactee movement.
The sources assert that a pattern emerges, which they term the red and black thread. It links the Nordic appearance, which strongly aligns with the Aryan or fascist ideal of the master race, directly to the underlying ideology of the contactee handlers.
So the argument is that the contactees may have been tasked with spreading a falsely benevolent image as a form of long-term psychological operation.
Exactly. Preparing humanity to accept rule by this technologically superior elder race.
Let's examine a specific, concrete example of this alleged connection. The highly unusual history of George Van Tassel and his location in the California desert.
Van Tassel was a known aviator, a former Lockheed employee who acquired a very unique piece of property beneath giant rock in the California desert. This semi-subterranean lair was acquired directly from a man named Frank Kritzer.
And Kritzer had a past.
A deeply sinister one. Kritzer was a German immigrant who was later confirmed by intelligence sources to have been a highly placed Nazi spy. He was working to develop German assets and occult technological connections in California during World War II.
And what happened to Kritzer? The end of his story is bizarre.
It is. When police attempted to raid his subterranean compound, Kritzer was killed when his massive hidden stash of dynamite exploded.
And Van Tassel just moves in.
Van Tassel then moved straight into the former Nazi spy's lair, which soon became a famous meeting point, a mecca for flying saucer landings and close encounters involving the Nordics.
That continuity it's highly suggestive. It implies that the esoteric technological and ideological networks associated with the Nazi project, including their obsession with anti-gravity and a pure Aryan master race, didn't just disappear in 1945.
The argument is that they were immediately folded into the UFO and contactee narrative.
It absolutely suggests that. The sources also say this occurred against a backdrop of influential occultists and financiers, some of whom had funded the rise of European fascism as a bulwark against communism, and were also interested in developing anti-gravity tech.
Yes, based on recovered or captured Tesla zero-point energy designs. If the breakaway civilization is chronologically superior, they would have targeted and influenced these specific, technologically savvy ideological groups.
This suggests the breakaway civilization had extremely deep roots in mid-20th century power structures. And the infiltration, according to the sources, it extended right into the highest levels of the British military establishment.
Yes. The case of Sir Peter Horsley is profoundly disturbing, just in its implications of foreknowledge and steep penetration. Horsley eventually became Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the British Strike Command.
Which, at the height of the Cold War, that position placed his finger metaphorically on the nuclear trigger.
It did.
And when did he have contact with these entities?
In 1954, decades before he reached his peak military rank, he was contacted by two individuals who were clearly Nordics, using the pseudonyms Mrs. Markham and Mr. Janus.
How did they even get to him?
This is the unsettling part. Mrs. Markham made contact through a highly secure channel via a security figure at Buckingham Palace, indicating an incredible level of deep penetration into the British state apparatus.
What did they want? What was the subject of their conversation, and what did they reveal?
The conversation focused heavily on nuclear disarmament and the future trajectory of global power. But what absolutely terrified Horsley was Mr. Janus's apparent complete knowledge of all Britain's top secret nuclear secrets.
Knowledge that should have been utterly restricted.
Yes, to the highest, most secure levels of military command. This wasn't intelligence gathering. This was operational knowledge presented to Horsley as simple fact.
So not only did they have access to state secrets, but the source material suggests this was a targeted meeting based on their time travel capability.
Precisely. The sources argue that given Horsley later achieved one of the most critical military positions in the UK, the time travelers operating with chronological superiority may have possessed foreknowledge of his entire career trajectory.
So they targeted him decades in advance.
To push a specific agenda. In this case, global disarmament, perhaps because they viewed nuclear proliferation as a threat to their long-term genetic project on Earth.
What did Horsley do?
He eventually initiated an MI5 investigation, which forced Mrs. Markham to rapidly vacate her apartment, but the damage was done. The point was made. The contactee movement, therefore, appears to be part of a vast, politically charged, and highly sophisticated psychological warfare campaign designed to control political outcomes.
If the underlying philosophy is one of genetic ownership and control, we should expect to find physical evidence of that claim. Like branding or tagging property.
Right.
This moves us directly into the evidence of implants and the systemic violence of animal mutilations.
And the sources are completely unequivocal about this. These beings, whom they identify as the breakaway civilization, forcibly tag us like we tag animals in the wild or brand cattle on a ranch.
It's technological tagging.
Yes, used for tracking, monitoring, and potentially controlling the genetic stock of terrestrial humanity. It affirms the non-humanoid nature of these encounters from a psychological standpoint.
Let's delve into the analysis of these alleged implants. We should focus on the highly documented case of Patricia from that 1969 Texas camping trip.
Right. Patricia and her husband, John, were camping when they witnessed a large domed saucer that flooded their car with an intense blue-green light. They experienced missing time, and John recalled seeing something under a bridge.
And years later, an object was found.
Two objects. Years later, in 1995, Dr. Roger Lear, a noted surgeon, extracted two strange objects from Patricia's left toe.
And what were the objects themselves like?
They were small, highly unusual. One was triangular, sort of T-shaped, and the other was seed-shaped with these tiny hair-like tendrils coming off it.
And the body hadn't rejected them.
That's the crucial part. They were encased in an extremely tough, fibrous, impenetrable biological membrane. It suggests the body's attempt to quarantine foreign material had completely failed. The objects were integrated.
The technical analysis is the most critical component here. What did laboratories like Los Alamos National Laboratories find when they analyzed the objects?
The analysis was done using double-blind protocols, and it revealed something, startling. The objects were composed of about 36 elements found commonly on Earth, nothing chemically exotic.
Okay.
However, their isotopic ratios were significantly, demonstrably different from the ratios normally and naturally found in terrestrial geology, biology, or industry.
Why are the isotopic ratios the technical insight we need to focus on? Explain the significance of that divergence for us.
Think of it this way. Every element, like iron or nickel, has multiple isotopes. Those are atoms of that element with different numbers of neutrons. In nature, on Earth, these isotopes always exist in a specific fixed ratio. It's like the chemical fingerprint of our planet. To artificially alter those ratios, to produce a metal that is, say, 90% of a rare isotope instead of the 5% found naturally, requires immense amounts of directed energy. It often involves cyclotrons or a very advanced nuclear science.
So the objects were manufactured using a process capable of artificial isotopic modification, a process that would allow them to engineer materials for, say, extreme durability, or unique electromagnetic properties, or even self-healing capabilities.
Precisely. This level of technical accomplishment was not remotely feasible for the leading world scientists in America and Russia until decades after the 1950s and 60s.
So the technical implication is clear.
It's crystal clear. The manufacturers of these tags are operating on a completely different scientific timeline, which is fully supportive of the hypothesis that they are technologically advanced time travelers. It proves the technology is far outside known terrestrial capabilities of the time.
Beyond the technological tagging of humans, we have the absolute horror of systemic violence against animals, the mutilation phenomena. The surgical precision used is what confounds law enforcement and researchers.
The sources highlight the quintessential example. Lady, a horse mutilated in the San Luis Valley, Colorado, back in 1967.
What happened to her?
Lady was found stripped of flesh from the neck up, with the underlying skeleton exposed and stark white. The central confounding mystery was the utter absence of blood.
No blood at all.
None. Neither on the carcass nor on the surrounding ground, which just defies the expected laws of gravity and biology. And selective organs were removed: the heart, lungs, and thyroid gland.
If there was no blood, how were the wounds inflicted?
The sources indicate that the cut skin edges were found to be cauterized, sealed by heat. Microscopic analysis of the cells was consistent with the use of a laser.
And this provides another vital chronological clue.
It does. This event occurred in 1967. That's long before medical lasers were routinely used in sophisticated surgical procedures. They didn't really enter common medical practice until the late 1970s. Again, the technology employed points to a chronological superiority of at least a decade, if not more.
This surgical capability, coupled with the lack of blood, implies a rapid, highly advanced operation, maybe involving anti-gravity or a localized energy field that instantaneously coagulates or even vaporizes the blood.
And this systemic violence is consistently accompanied by another disturbing observation: the infamous black helicopters.
Right.
Consistent reports emerged all across the American West of silent, unmarked, often enormous black helicopters chasing UFOs near these mutilation sites.
That suggests two things to me. First, that these acts are being tracked by some serious agency, likely a clandestine intelligence or military operation within the U.S. government. And second, that these acts are not purely alien, but involve some kind of terrestrial collaboration, or at least terrestrial monitoring.
That terrestrial link becomes far more sinister when you consider the testimony of a military member cited in the sources. This individual testified that the map used by their agency for tracking these mutilations had a specific dark category.
What was it?
It was labeled in pink. For humans.
A category for human mutilations. That strongly suggests the U.S. government or some powerful covert agency knew that the practice of surgical, bloodless removal of organs was not limited to livestock.
Exactly. It raises the horrific possibility that the breakaway civilization or their highly placed agents were also harvesting or operating on human victims under similar, surgically precise and untraceable circumstances.
Possibly for advanced biological material or genetic sampling.
It transitions the concept of ownership from mere tagging into active, frightening resource management.
The cumulative evidence, the hyperdimensional tech, the NORDIC master race identity, the fascist links, the physical ownership, it all demands we try to understand their strategic goal. What is the overall philosophical posture of this breakaway civilization? The sources introduce a complex concept to explain their methodology. Weltanschauungskrieg, or worldview warfare, is the core concept describing the methodology of this civilization. It's not just about military conflicts or conquering resources. It's defined as a deliberate, destructive departure in worldview warfare, aimed at the total deconstruction of human societies.
So the objective is conquest on the most fundamental level.
Yes, on the construction of folklore by the collective unconscious.
So they are essentially fighting a war over how humanity perceives reality, its history, its myths, and its own place in the cosmos. They're trying to own the narrative itself.
Precisely. And given their proven time-traveling capability and hyperdimensional control, this isn't just psychological warfare. This is hyperdimensional conquest. The sources describe our cosmos as a quantum computational information processing system, a vast computer.
A vast computer capable of storing all past states of play. Essentially like an Akashic record of every potential history.
So their time travel isn't just to visit the past. It's to interact with this information system, to actively change timelines.
Correct. By changing the past, even slightly, by appearing as gods, by influencing Nazi technology, or by intimidating UN officials, they rewrite the future. They dominate human history from a position of chronological superiority.
And this ability to manipulate the past and our collective perception of it, that could be why phenomena like the alleged Mandela effect or the memory of alternate timelines are becoming more prevalent.
It could be a glitch in the matrix caused by their ongoing intervention.
The overarching goal of this breakaway civilization, then, according to the sources, is to exert total conscious control over the historical narrative and, by extension, our genetic future.
The theory posits that this civilization coalesced after key figures, often tied to esoteric scientific projects like Project Kronos in Nazi-occupied Prague, opted to break away from our world and pursue advanced technology in secret. They now see terrestrial humanity as their property.
Guiding our history and ideologies from a position of superiority.
Yes. Their obsession is to achieve a very narrow eugenic vision of genetic perfection, and they're using us as the raw material.
It's a profound philosophical challenge. It implies that our sense of self-determination, our history, our societal structures, even our spiritual beliefs, may have been engineered and manipulated for millennia by a future version of humanity that sees itself as the only legitimate inheritor of Earth.
They view themselves not just as guides,
but as owners and ultimate arbiters of human destiny.
and that technological superiority, specifically their mastery over time and dimension, gives them the ultimate tool in this worldview warfare. They don't need to defeat us militarily today, they simply ensure the timeline produces the result they desire tomorrow.
This deep dive has given us a truly terrifying look at who the sources argue these beings are. A highly advanced, philosophically fascist faction of future humanity, and the chilling evidence of their manipulation.
To summarize the chilling conclusion of this segment, the entities behind the most extreme close encounters are not little green men, but highly advanced human time travelers. They adhere to a master race ideology, actively manipulating human history, consciousness, and genetics through terrifying acts.
Abductions, implants with custom-made elements, systemic mutilations.
All while projecting a carefully constructed, benign public facade through things like the contactee phenomenon. They see us as their property to manage.
That is an overwhelming amount of information to process, especially given the implications for our own history. Before we wrap up this portion of the analysis, you really have to ask yourself, based on the evidence of hyperdimensional technology and long-term world manipulation we've just discussed, if the goal of this breakaway civilization is to achieve narrow vision of genetic perfection through total control, how would recognizing that we are potentially a slave race affect our ability to achieve true independence or self-determination today? It changes everything about how we view agency.
It forces the ultimate, most difficult question. Is human history truly our own?
We will continue our analysis by discussing other parts of the book, which will explore the larger cosmic implications of this conflict, including the manufacturing of the moon and the war on Mars. We'll be connecting this master race back through ancient history and across the solar system, analyzing the material on the ancient origins of this breakaway civilization. Join us next time for more of the Deep Dive.